This is every major death in Jujutsu Kaisen explained. Now you may initially think that some of these deaths are not very important, but you will definitely be surprised by the effects that they have on down the line. Let's start with everyone's favorite racist, Suguru Geto. Geto was a key player in not only the main storyline, but also the development of two of the strongest sorcerers of all time. Obviously, Yuta and Gojo. At first, his life was spent as Gojo's best friend and moral balancer before he completely snapped and went to the dark side. As we know, Geto set up the night parade of 100 demons so that he could single out Yuta and capture his cursed spirit partner Rika. She just so happens to be a special grade curse, one of the strongest in the world, so there's that. Geto succeeds in singling them out, but it's not a fight that he can win. See, Geto's curse manipulation technique allows him to absorb curses of any range of power, but first he has to beat them in combat. So obviously, in order to capture Rika, who I just said was one of the strongest special grade curses out there, he has to, beat her in battle, and that doesn't happen. He loses handily. Now this battle leaves Geto on the brink of death, and as Gojo finishes up his part of the evening's events, fighting everybody off away from Suguru and Yuta, he shows back up and he's forced to do the unthinkable. He has to put down his best friend. Forever. The implications of this death are some of the most important in all of the story. First of all, if Gojo didn't already feel alone as if he's the strongest in the world and he's sitting on an island, he definitely does now. Imagine that you have lived your entire life only being able to relate to one person, and that one person's mental struggles and disillusionment with the world at large leads to you being the one who has to put them down, has to kill them, never to speak to them again. Now, I don't know about you, but I think this is tragic and traumatic at every single level. Oh yeah, and if that's not tragic enough for both Geto and Gojo, think about the next step in the equation. Kinjaku steals Geto's dead body and he comes back to haunt Gojo. Now obviously by taking over Geto's body, Kinjaku, who's the 1,000-year-old entity that, takes over bodies and wants to see the world burn, he gains his curse manipulation technique and domain expansion. I think that's wound perfusion if I'm right. And obviously these are two of the strongest abilities in all of Jujutsu Kaisen because, there were only 4 special grade sorcerers in the modern era and Geto was one of them. And now Kinjaku has Geto's body on top of all the abilities he already has. It's just terrible. Kinjaku obviously uses these abilities as offensive attacks, but he also does something else with them, and that's manipulate Tengen's body after his evolution. The manipulation of Tengen's body merged with the entirety of Japan. It's really convoluted. It could have been the end of the world. It never gets there because Jujutsu Kaisen kind of falls off, but anyway, it could have been terrible. Back to Gojo's side of it, imagine your best friend's been dead for years and then all of a sudden he just shows back up in Shibuya, just long enough for the guy that's inhabiting the body to seal you away in the prison realm. Genius move by old Kenny, but tragic for Gojo. This allows Kinjaku to set up the culling game and facilitate the return of Sukuna. Now this part is obviously a smaller part of the story, but Geto's death greatly affects Mimiko and Nanako, who are the twin sisters that he saves from being executed and tortured by their village whenever they were curse users whenever they were children. Now these two seek revenge against Kinjaku for stealing Geto's body, and they ask Sukuna to do this for them. Obviously, that doesn't go over so well. You know what happens in the anime. Next up, let's flash back and talk about the death that changed literally everything in both Gojo and Geto's lives. The death of Riko Amanai. Now Riko's the star plasma vessel whose entire existence revolved around her duty to merge with Tengen to stop him from, evolving into an ethereal being. Because of her duty as the star plasma vessel, she was being hunted down by 2 different groups in order to prevent the merger so that Tengen would evolve. And since she was being hunted, she was tasked with protection, obviously. So Gojo and Geto, who were 2 of the strongest students in Jujutsu High at the time, well, they were the strongest 2. They were special grade when they were students. Anyway, they were both tasked with her protection. Now, they both grow very, very attached to Riko in the 2 days that they protect her. At the end of their 2-day protection detail, they return to Jujutsu High where she's gonna go merge with Tengen, and they're ambushed by Toji Fushiguro. Gojo stays behind to fight Toji while Geto takes her forward to, do her duty. Well, we know how that turned out for Gojo. He gets absolutely manhandled by Toji because obviously, Gojo doesn't yet know reverse curse technique, red or purple, so he kind of just gets confused and then speed blitzed by Toji. At the same time, Geto reveals that he and Gojo had a philosophical conundrum to think about. They both come to the same conclusion and agree that if Riko gets down there and she decides she wants to live her own life and not merge with Tengen, that they would protect her. They would let her go back to her normal life. Nobody's gonna stop them after all. This poor girl was born into this role. She never had the choice. She was always born to do this. So if she doesn't have to do this. It's kind of life-changing for her, literally. Just as it seemed she was about to reach forward and grab Geto's hand to, go back to her actual life, that life was snuffed out by Toji Fushiguro via a bullet through the brain. Now, just like he did with Gojo, Toji absolutely runs through Geto and his entire arsenal, but for some reason he decides not to kill him. At this point, Geto's entire life philosophy begins to flip on its head. You see, up to this point, Geto had been the one that wants to protect and serve humans, despite the fact that they do everything they do that's in the negative. They're not very good people most of the time to Jujutsu sorcerers, while Gojo was the one who questioned why they did what they did. The contracted killing of Riko Amanai and his colleagues' deaths that soon followed this turned Geto's philosophy upside down. He really starts to question why they do what they do, why they protect humans when humans just want to use them as tools. Now, I say humans like they're not humans, they're just talking about normal humans. Monkeys, if you will. Well, this is when Geto starts to call them monkeys, like I just said, and he slaughters an entire village of people that are torturing little girls, like we talked about earlier, Mimiko and Nanako. Those are the girls he protected whenever he completely snapped and became whatever he became before his death. An evil priest, if you will. Now, Gojo, at the same time as Geto, begins to change and flip his philosophy. He prepares to save everyone who's prepared to be saved. He's not saying he's gonna just protect every human for the sake of it, but he's gonna protect those who need to be protected, who can't protect themselves, and who aren't evil. I think that's probably the best philosophy on this whole Jujutsu society thing. Alright, since we're already in the era, we might as well talk about the death of Toji Fushiguro. Toji was a cold-blooded killer, and in my opinion, he was one of the top 5 strongest sorcerers or non-sorcerers, whatever you like to say there, in the entire series. Like we said, this is the guy who basically killed pre-awakened Gojo, who was still probably the strongest sorcerer in the world at the time, but he also beat Geto, who was said to maybe be a little bit better. It's really not a contest in my book. Toji's that guy. Now, Toji's death comes at the hands of awakened Gojo. It should be noted that Toji's life affected more than his actual death did, unlike some of these others we're talking about. He set Gojo onto the path to awaken by leaving him for dead. He began pushing Geto to the dark side, and he actually caused the evolution of Master Tengen, although that really didn't have as many repercussions as we thought it was going to. Toji's death did have one absolutely massive repercussion though. Instead of being sold to the Zenin clan and living that life, his son Megumi Fushiguro was taken in by Gojo and raised by probably the strongest sorcerer in the world. Well, there's no probably about that. He's the strongest sorcerer in the world. Probably the best teacher in the world is where I was going with that. He may not be the best teacher. He is the strongest though, so he got really good schooling, in other words. Oh yeah, and I do think that the awakening of Maki Zenin had something to do with the complete void that Toji left in death as the one that was completely shunned by cursed energy. This is completely speculation, and I know it has to do with heavenly restriction, but that's just my idea. Now, if Toji was still around during the events of the modern story, it's hard to say who he would ally himself with, although I think he would probably just go with the one that would offer him a bigger paycheck, because he's a bag chaser for real. Okay, so we've been kind of going in chronological order. Not really, but we were in the past arc. Anyway, let's talk about Yuta's past, Riko Orimoto's death. Riko was Yuta's best friend as a child, even vowing to marry him once they grew up, but obviously that never happens. She gets run over and instantly killed, but rather than just disappearing, she gets cursed. She becomes a special grade vengeful curse spirit strong enough to be recognized by Gojo himself as the Queen of Curses. In her death, she becomes Yuta's partner in crime, even becoming like a very integral part of his moveset. First off, her full manifestation form allows Yuta to borrow the curse techniques and tools that he copies from other people. Also, when paired with Yuta, their combined curse energy is stronger and more plentiful than that of Gojo's, which is crazy. Now we know that Rika is instrumental in the death of Geto, but she's also instrumental in pretty much every other fight that Yuta ever fights. As sad as it was, Rika's death leads to way more strength and, sources of power for Yuta than he would have had otherwise. So it is what it is. It's very sad, but she's still with him somehow. Alright, let's get into the ones that really hurt. Junpei Yoshino was an innocent kid who got bullied until the very moment of his death. Once he'd finally made a true friend in Yuji, his life was snuffed out by the evil powers and machinations of Mahito. I did an entire breakdown and video about Junpei's life, so let's just talk about his death. Yuji is kind of forced to befriend this guy, but he actually grows to like him and think he's actually got a real friend. He tries to bring him to Jujutsu High to be a sorcerer. Let's not forget the intro that showed him as a sorcerer at Jujutsu High before he dies. I'll never forgive them for that. Now, obviously, before any of this can ever happen, Mahito uses idol transfiguration on Junpei just to mess with Yuji, which makes me so mad still to this day. I really hate this one, if you can't tell. Despite having the means to actually actually help Junpei, Sukuna refuses just out of spite to Yuji. Junpei quickly dies from the malformation and something inside Yuji snaps. He realizes that this thing, Mahito, is nothing but a curse and is his complete opposite in this universe. Now, more transfigured humans from Mahito show Yuji more of the horrors of this world, and this makes him vow to kill Mahito no matter what. Junpei's death is the first step in the breaking of Yuji Itadori's smile, and for that, it will always sadden me, but I really do hate it. Now, since we're talking about the victims of Mahito, let's talk about Kento Nanami next. Nanami was just a regular guy forced into a world of Jujutsu sorcery, and he actually wanted out until he got out, and he realized how meaningless it is to live that life whenever he could make a difference in this world full of cursed spirits. Nanami was there with Yuji taking on Mahito from the very beginning, even serving as a mentor to the boy. Now, Nanami is an absolute force to be reckoned with in Shibuya, single-handedly taking on plenty of threats until he gets to his fight against Dagon. The special grade cursed spirits domain expansion Horizon of the Captivating Skanda was even too much for Naobito, Nanami, and Maki to take on. Nanami loses an eye and Naobito an arm before they're kind of bailed out by resurrected Toji and Megumi, who got them out of there, but it's kind of out of the frying pan into the fire for Nanami, literally. He almost immediately gets jumped by Jogo once he's out of Dagon's domain, which leads to the burning of half his body. Then he has the misfortune of stumbling into Mahito. Now, already on the brink of death, hallucinating while fighting transfigured humans and beasts that Mahito sends at him, he just kind of toyed with until Yuji shows up. Nanami looks at Yuji and tells him that you've got it from here, as Mahito touches Nanami's head and explodes his entire torso. Now, Yuji absolutely loses it, as you can imagine. You would too if it was your mentor getting exploded in front of you, and this death stays with him until the very end. Yuji continues to fight Mahito, who goes on to all but kill Nobara right in front of Yuji's face. At this point, Yuji breaks. He's so distraught that he cannot even fight anymore. That is until his brother Todo shows up to save the day. They fight Mahito even more, and they actually get to the point where Todo loses an arm in front of Yuji as well. It's like it's never gonna stop. The emotional damage that Mahito has put Yuji through in the last 20 minutes is more than most people experience in their entire lifetime. On top of that, Mahito grasps the true essence of his soul and then morphs into his instant spirit body of distorted killing ultimate form. Yuji keeps fighting, completely losing all of his humanity. Now, he beats Mahito and he vows to kill Mahito in every incarnation he ever returns in, until Kenjaku shows up. Now, Kenjaku appears as if he's gonna save Mahito's life, and that obviously infuriates Yuji because he just beat him, but this doesn't happen. Kenjaku absorbs Mahito. He's gonna use him later in curse manipulation, I guess, or at least that was the plan. Anyway, this basically means that Yuji will never get the chance to truly kill his archenemy Mahito. Yuji's colleagues rally around him, but obviously these deaths, the deaths of Nanami, he thinks the death of Nobara, it turns out she's not dead, which I called, but anyway, and this death of Mahito completely changed Yuji in ways that you wouldn't think possible for the main character of a shonen anime. Alright, now's a good time to say that we're about to get into heavy manga spoilers, so anything past the anime, past Shibuya, is fair game. The Zenin clan uses the messed up Jujutsu Society's orders to capture and kill anyone associated with the outlaw Gojo Satoru as an excuse to capture and kill Magi and Mai Zenin. Once they're captured, they're both beaten within an inch of their life and left for dead in a pit of cursed spirits. Now, it's important to mention that they're beaten to death, quotation marks, death, by their father, Ogi Zenin, who says that they're basically complete failures and stands on his life. Probably the worst thing your dad can say about you. Painful. Well, anyway, in this confrontation, Mai was fatally wounded, and as she passes away, she gives the rest of her soul to Maki. She dies, and Maki's true power is realized. See, in the world of Jujutsu, twins are seen as one individual, so that means that Maki's affliction can never be fully realized until Mai's death. This affliction is known as heavenly restriction, which means that she, like Toji, has zero cursed energy at all, but the heavens make up for it by blessing them with physical prowess. Now, when Mai dies, she takes the little bit of cursed energy that she had, that the universe associated with Maki's person, with her. Like I said, the universe recognizes these two as one individual because of how the world works. Anyway, she takes this cursed energy with her, and as a result, Maki's heavenly restriction is fully realized. Now, besides just physical prowess, she's able to slip in and out of barriers, even being able to completely ignore the effects of domain expansions because she has literally zero cursed energy. These barriers, this domain expansion, they don't know that she exists. All of this was possible due to the death of her sister Mai, which is sad, but it leads to great power for Maki. Principal Yaga's death is one that's unfortunate, unnecessary, and generally seen as unimportant. Though unimportant, it hits like a freight train. Much like the Zenin hunting down their own Maki and Mai, Yaga was hunted down by his own counterpart from Kyoto, Principal Gakuganji. He was repeatedly asked how cursed corpses such as Panda actually have life, but he never tells them the answer. He refuses to say this until he literally is about to die whenever Gakuganji is actively killing him, and then he tells him the secret of cursed corpses as a curse from me to you. Now this death actually greatly saddened Gakuganji because he didn't hate Yaga, they were actually on good terms. He was just following orders, and if he would have told them the secrets behind cursed corpses, he probably wouldn't have been executed. Not to mention Panda was also absolutely torn up by this development. It greatly saddened all of his students, even Gojo after he escapes from the prison realm. And it makes me sad. If it makes me sad, it probably makes all of you sad. I know how that works. Everybody loves this guy because he's just a lovable guy. That's why I included it. Next up, Yuki Tsukumo, who is one of the 4 special grade sorcerers, is bested and killed by Kenjaku in a fight over Master Tengen. Now, Yuki and Chozo actually hold off Kenjaku for a great amount of time, even having help from Tengen himself with barriers. Well, itself. I think Tengen was actually a girl in its real life. We don't know. Anyway, despite this, they still couldn't beat Kenjaku. He was just too good. All of his 1,000 years of experience, they couldn't beat him. Now, Yuki's curse technique Star Rage and Shikigami Garuda actually deal a lot of Kenjaku, but it's her final attack that almost beats Kenjaku. I just said Kenjaku like 4 times in one sentence. I need to go back to English class. Now, Yuki realizes that she's not gonna beat Kenny in a 1v1, so she goes to her maximum attack Black Hole. See, Star Rage lets Yuki add imaginary mass to herself and her Shikigami up to a certain point that doesn't slow them down, but whenever it gets to an even higher level, there's a threshold, and that's when it actually does start affecting her. She continues to add mass to herself past this point until she becomes a literal black hole swallowing everything. Obviously, this sacrifices herself in the process. Kenjaku, being the slimy little guy he is, actually has a technique to get him out of this. He survives. His former vessel Kaori Itadori had a cursed technique called anti-gravity system that allowed him to reverse the effects of the gravity of Yuki's black hole so that he can just slip out of there. Now, having beaten Yuki, Kenjaku slips off to Master Tengen and absorbs him using curse manipulation, but it doesn't actually lead to anything significant. We thought it was going to be the end of the world. It's going to be a merger, but that just never happens. Now, Yuki's death was very sad to me because she doesn't actually accomplish anything with it. Because of Kenjaku's sliminess, he's able to get out of there. But at least she encourages Chozo to live on. I say live on, but here we are. Speaking of Chozo, let's talk about his death. Chozo was an integral part of Jujutsu Kaisen from the time of his very first fight against Yuji up until the very end when he sacrifices himself for the boy. Chozo immediately recognizes his blood connection with Yuji and takes him under his wing. He tries and kinda successfully teaches Yuji how to use blood manipulation, which was the curse technique that Yuji gained by absorbing the rest of his curse womb death painting brothers. In the end, Chozo became one of Yuji's closest allies, and he jumps in the fight against Sukuna with him. Sukuna decides to unleash Divine Flame on Yuji and Chozo moves to the boy's defense. He opens a simple domain around Yuji, but in the process, he gets burned away to ash. There's nothing left of him. Now, this death surely would have hit Yuji like a ton of bricks, but somehow Todo always knows right when to show up. He shows up and tells Yuji that it's probably going to be alright. Chozo was indeed not alright. Chozo's self-sacrifice to protect Yuji was absolutely paramount to the eventual defeat of Sukuna, but it was one of the saddest deaths in all of Jujutsu Kaisen to me. Kenjaku's death was one of the most satisfying in the entire series, but he actually went out in a really cool way. He has a comedy duet duel with Takaba as part of Takaba's curse technique Comedian. Now, we can take a step back and think about what would have happened to the world if Kenjaku didn't die. Kenjaku was off doing side quests like hunting down Culling Game players and killing them, setting up the merger of Tengen's power and the entirety of Japan, and a whole lot of other stuff whenever the good guys send Takaba to him. Now, they have their fun, and at the end of the fight, Takaba is satisfied. He's not going to kill him. He doesn't kill people. Kenjaku was probably about to kill Takaba because he just doesn't really care to keep people alive, you know? That's just how he rolls. But that's when Yuta shows up and beheads the monster. Now, due to the severed head, he can't switch bodies or use reverse curse technique, so he actually dies. Like, for the first time ever. Before dying, Kenjaku states that his will shall be carried on. Well, his will likely carried on to Sukuna, and that will was probably to, you know, merge Japan and Tengen and do all this other stuff, wreak havoc across the world, but we don't really see that happen. The whole problem with, you know, his will being carried on is that Sukuna himself was not going to live that long. He was going to get jumped and defeated like he did. And we're going to talk about that next. Real quick though, Yuta gained something from the death of Kenjaku using his copy technique. He gained Kenjaku's own body twitching technique. This in and of itself was absolutely crucial to the defeat of Sukuna. Speaking of, Sukuna's death was interesting. I think his death came about in a good way, but the endless Sukuna cycle leading up to this and then the abrupt end to the manga kind of left a sour taste in my mouth. Anyway, Nobara came back, Todo came back stronger, Yuta came back in Gojo's body, Yuji gained like 5 powers, and so on and so forth. It was awesome to see, but like I said, it was pretty inconsequential because the manga just kind of kills itself after. I'm still not over it. There's nothing really to talk to because like I said, the manga just ends. His death doesn't have any impact because he just dies and it's over. Finally, we have the death of our golden boy himself, Gojo. Gojo's life was one that dominated all others, and he knows it too. He was arrogant, but he could afford to be arrogant. Up until his death, no one in the entire world except for, Toji could touch Gojo, literally. Gojo's death came as an off-screen slash from Maharaga's adaptive ability, and honestly, I think we all saw it coming at the exact moment that it happened. We didn't see it coming because it looked like he was going to win, but we saw that he was not going to win against Sukuna. Despite the whole, nah, I'd win. He didn't win. He was able to teach the main characters a lot about cursed energy and domains in general, as well as Sukuna's powers by, them watching him fight. Without him there fighting Sukuna and wearing him down and showing them how they could possibly win, they just simply wouldn't have. Now, like the last 2 deaths we covered, his death doesn't actually have that huge of an impact because from the time of his death up until the end of the manga is not that long. It's literally just the Sukuna fight. Like I said, he influenced the fight, but other than that, there's nothing really else to talk about. Like Kenjaku's death, Gojo's death gave Yuta another weapon, which was his body itself. Yuta was instrumental in Sukuna's defeat using Gojo's body, so I guess you can say that his body had something to do in death that was very important, but wasn't that much. I mean, he just kind of dies and then they fight. They just keep fighting. So this has been every important death in Jujutsu Kaisen, in my opinion anyway, covered. But I know you're wondering how some of these, especially Sukuna's, came about. So watch this video right here that's going to tell you about Yuji's powers that he used to defeat Sukuna. And until next time, peace.